Hello and welcome to this instalment of Talkin Trim. I'm Jonathan Skinner and today we're looking at the occasional rear seat unit and the rear bulkhead panel for the Triumph TR3A. Now specifically this is for the early style 3A, which is any Triumph TR3A below chassis number TS60000. That being said, it's also a bit more unique in that regard. So occasional rear seat is exactly that. It was occasional. It was not fitted to all the cars. It was an optional extra. You didn't see a huge amount of them, but certainly enough of them out there. And from what our records suggest, if you had an occasional rear seat unit, then the rear bulkhead panel was pleated as opposed to HFRF-welded. At this point, it's probably worth saying it's worth checking out some of my other videos which do detail the TR3A kits in a bit more detail, especially with that HFRF weld on it, because this style here with the pleating is quite rare in the grand scheme of things. Just to reference what I'm talking about, HFRF welding is this pattern here. Now obviously this one hasn't been trimmed up yet. As you can see, it's just had the pattern embossed on it, and this one's actually a leather one before we send it upstairs for trimming. But you can see it's embossed going across, including across this top line here, whereas this version here, everything is sewn and pleated, and it has piping going from left to right on it. So that's the key difference. And I'd say this pleated one here is extremely rare in the grand scheme of things. The majority of them would have left with the embossed pattern on it, albeit on vinyl ambler, as opposed to leather, as per that tan one there. But our records show that if you had an occasional rear seat, which was quite rare, you would have had a pleated rear bulkhead panel, certainly on the early style cars anyway. Now, just to go over the occasional rear seat, there were two versions depending on pre or post TS60000. For the pre, which is this one, it was curved at the front and quite narrow, and you had these metal brackets sat underneath them. And the reason for that was the early cars had a sloped rear floor section, or rear shelf section rather, in the back of the car, as per these here. It's a continuation of the TR2 and the TR3, whereas the later style of 3As, anything after 60,000, it was flat at the back, and this is the square version of the rear seat unit, which again, do see my other videos that showcase the different ones of those. In this basic diagram here, you can see that's the sloped version there, whereas that's the flat version there. So obviously the flat ones, it was a bigger cover unit, and it literally just sat on top, whereas this one here, it had to have a bracket underneath it to allow it to sit horizontal in the car. So just bear that in mind there. Now, for many years these brackets haven't been available, but we now have a source for those, so just bear that in mind. Rear seat unit, again, I have done other videos showing it, so do refer to those. But we can offer the cover fully sewn, ready to be trimmed to your original unit, or we can offer them fully trimmed up. We can also offer the foam and the plywood separately if you prefer, but we tend to recommend that we do the hard work for us. We've been for you. We've been doing these for years. We know what we're doing with them, and they turn out very, very nicely. There, as you can see, everything is trimmed extremely neatly. Round, the piping stays consistent, kind of goes round, dips down ever so slightly, then comes back up again. You get little bits of lumps on the back there, but that won't matter because it's pressing against the side of the car there. So that's the rear seat unit. And as I say, our records indicate that if you had one of these on the earlier cars, you had a pleated style bulkhead, and if you had a pleated style bulkhead, you normally had this much more substantial panel backing to it. So just to show you that, thicker panel to start with, akin to this one here, although this one's seen better days, shall we say. And then it had a metal panel on the top of it here, which we do have the metal panels here, riveted on, trimmed all the way around. This is the there's a fixing stuck in there, which we obviously tape up just to make sure it doesn't get damaged during transit, but that's to allow the tonneau capping aluminiums to hook into that element there, as per original spec. So that was the pleated style bulkhead. The majority of the bulkheads, as I've mentioned, had the HFRF weld pattern on it, and they're trimmed to just a one-piece hardboard panel, which is vacuum molded round to create that curve at the top there. There are two versions of that as well. You've got, that's actually the late one with a much bigger cutout for the diff hump, and then the earlier ones had a much narrower cutout for the diff hump, much more akin to that one there. So yeah, kind of three different bulkhead styles, I guess. Early, late, but within the early, you seem to have the different backing setup and actual finish setup based on if you had an occasional rear seat or not. I'd say take all of that with a rather large pinch of salt, because our archive records, they're good, they span back decades, but anyone that's ever gone through an original Triumph parts book will know how lacking, shall we say, in information they are. And so we've obviously done our best to interpret these and note these things down, but one, they were very inconsistent, and two, the information was lacking. So the rest of our notes are sort of garnered over the years working closely with our customers, but I'd always say that there are going to be exceptions to the rules with these sorts of things. We've certainly come across and supplied pleated rear bulkheads on that style of bulkhead panel there, but whether or not they had an occasional rear seat, we're not sure on. So certainly from our further investigations, it seems like they did go hand in hand in terms of the extra support and whatnot, but after that, not entirely sure. So like I say, pinch of salt. Of course, if you have any further information on these sorts of things, do please contact me. We do like working with customers to update our archives, as it helps the overall restoration community in that regard. So do bear that in mind. But we can offer the different versions. So like I say, majority are always like that, and do see my other video for more detailed looks at the HFRF versions of those. But this is a good interpretation for the pleated style one. So just to go over it, pleats, exactly like the seats, they kind of go in and out and in and out, genuine tuck and roll pleats as per the kind of front seats. So that's what's happened on these ones here. They're sewn, piped, and then it's all trimmed in place, and even down to, you can see the detail there. If I just roughly match them up there, you can see the seam lines matching up. Obviously that will be at the angle like that when everything is said and done in the car, with the brackets underneath supporting it on the floor. So yeah, I think that's done a decent coverage on there. Sorry, it was a bit topsy-turvy with the information there. It's hard to work out the best way of coming across with some of these bits and bobs, but hopefully you found that useful and informative. Needless to say, we have all of the different patterns, and we're very thorough with these sorts of things, so we like to discuss with our customers prior to starting to make anything exactly the spec that either was in their car or that they wanted to put in their car, so just bear that in mind. But yeah, hope you found it useful. Thanks for tuning in. Please remember to like and subscribe and share with other classic car enthusiasts out there. Obviously, if you have any further feedback or comments, please do use the comments area below, or alternatively, and more preferably, contacting me directly via our website or email address. But yeah, I hope you found that useful, and be sure to tune in next time. Thank you.